The text message arrived on a Tuesday morning, the sunlight streaming through my kitchen window painting bright, breezy patterns across the linoleum. It was a stark, almost jarring contrast to the immediate tightening in my stomach, a sensation that felt as unwelcome as a sudden chill on a summer day. Big family reunion this year. Uncle Joe's renting out a whole section of the Outer Banks resort. Everyone's so excited. We'll miss you. The ellipsis at the end felt deliberately placed, a tiny silent landmine waiting to detonate. Miss me. The thought, dry and sharp, pricked at my awareness. Funny that. They'd been doing a remarkably good job of it for quite some time now, I mused, the words forming silently in my mind. For years, I had meticulously cultivated an image of quiet helpfulness, the dependable cousin who never made waves, who was always the first to offer to pick up the tab for the extra rounds of drinks when everyone else's wallet suddenly felt inexplicably light. I was the one who would drive for hours, no questions asked, to pick someone up from the airport, the one who remembered birthdays and anniversaries with thoughtful, if sometimes modest, gifts. I was the steady presence, the reliable anchor. And then, with a slowness so subtle it was almost imperceptible at first, I had gradually morphed into the one they forgot to invite. The one whose calls seemed to go unanswered, or were met with vague, apologetic promises of catching up soon that never materialized. The one whose presence was no longer an expected, or perhaps, even a desired fixture in their communal narrative. It had started insidiously with small omissions. A missed invitation to a casual barbecue that I'd only heard about later. A forgotten birthday celebration that left a hollow ache in my chest. Each time I'd rationalized it, pushing the discomfort away. They're busy, I'd tell myself with a reassuring nod. They're stressed with work. It's not personal, it's just life happening. But the pattern, once established, became increasingly difficult to ignore. This text message, however, this was no longer deniable. This was confirmation, delivered with a veneer of polite concern that masked a passive-aggressive dismissal. A dismissal that stung far more deeply than any outright argument could have. They were heading to the Outer Banks, a place I knew intimately, a place where I had poured a significant portion of my heart and soul into creating a personal sanctuary, a refuge. And now it seemed they were assuming they were entitled to it. My Uncle Joe, the self-proclaimed patriarch of our sprawling, often dysfunctional clan, had always been the primary instigator of these grand mandatory family reunions. He revered the romanticized idea of unity, of a steadfast family legacy, even though he himself had often been the architect of the very rifts he lamented. He'd always made it abundantly clear that his word was law, his decisions final and unassailable. And lately, his decisions, however unspoken, had been decidedly against my inclusion, against my continued presence in the family circle. There hadn't been a single dramatic event, no grand earth-shattering betrayal that I could definitively point to and say, that was the moment. Instead, it had been a slow erosion, a quiet turning away from me, a collective decision, seemingly made without my knowledge or consent, a gradual fading from their collective consciousness. It was the unsettling, deeply disquieting feeling of being slowly, deliberately edited out of the family photo album, a figure being airbrushed from existence. I read the text message again, the words blurring slightly on the screen. Everyone's so excited. I allowed my mind to wander, to conjure images of them, a wave of familiar faces, their boisterous laughter echoing across the seemingly endless sandy dunes, their voices carrying indistinguishable yet familiar, on the salt-laced air. They were heading to my place. Not just to a beach house, any beach house, but to the beach house, the one I had purchased 3 years prior, a beacon of hope and escape after a particularly grueling soul-draining period at work. I had desperately needed an escape, a place to simply breathe, to reclaim a sense of self. I had fallen instantly, irrevocably in love with its weathered charm, its unobstructed panoramic ocean view, the breathtaking way the sun had set each evening in a glorious blaze of fiery orange and deep, velvety purple behind its wide, expansive deck. I had spent countless weekends there, my hands rough with paint and sandpaper, transforming its spaces, nurturing its spirit, planting hardy sea oats in the sandy yard, watching them sway in the ocean breeze. It was my haven, my personal slice of paradise, a sanctuary built with my own hands and my own dreams. And now it appeared they were planning to descend upon it, a cheerful, unsuspecting invasion, blissfully unaware of its true ownership, assuming, with their characteristic entitlement, that it was merely another anonymous rental property booked by the ever-resourceful Uncle Joe. A strange, almost unnerving calm began to settle over me. The initial sharp sting of exclusion, the raw pain of being forgotten, started to recede, gradually replaced by something colder, something more measured. I didn't feel an overwhelming surge of anger, not precisely. It was more a profound, quiet sense of disappointment, coupled with a dawning, sober realization of their deeply ingrained assumptions. They had clearly believed they held all the cards, that their collective decision to ignore me meant I was powerless, without leverage, without a place at their carefully constructed table. They didn't seem to grasp, or perhaps they hadn't even considered, that I held the key. For a solid hour I did nothing but slowly sip my now lukewarm coffee and stare out the window, observing the ordinary world going on outside my insulated existence. The mundane rhythm of life continued, oblivious to the internal shifts occurring within my own space. Then, with a quiet decisiveness, I opened my laptop. I didn't draft a scathing, emotionally charged email, nor did I reach for the phone to vent my frustrations to a sympathetic ear. Instead, with deliberate precision, I accessed my bank account, meticulously reviewed my rental property insurance policy, and made a few quiet, carefully placed phone calls. A plumber, a landscaper, a professional deep cleaning service. I scheduled them all, coordinating their arrival for the day after Uncle Joe's group was due to check out. I also made a mental note to contact the local authorities, a proactive measure, just to have the necessary paperwork in order regarding a potential trespassing issue. The reunion was, according to the text, scheduled to last for 5 days. I found myself picturing the unfolding scenario, a mental tableau of anticipated chaos. The overlapping schedules, the inevitable squabbles over who got which bedroom, the minor annoyances that were sure to arise. I envisioned them struggling with the unfamiliar, perhaps slightly cantankerous thermostat, attempting to decipher the elusive Wi-Fi password, perhaps even complaining, with a hint of petulance, about the perceived lack of certain amenities. They were accustomed to perfectly curated, effortless experiences, the kind Uncle Joe always orchestrated, where every detail was meticulously arranged and everything was taken care of for them. They wouldn't be taking care of anything at my house. In fact, they wouldn't even know where to begin. On the 3rd day of their alleged vacation, my phone rang, a persistent, insistent buzz that momentarily pulled me from my focused detachment. It was my mother. Her voice, usually a warm, familiar balm, was strained, tinged with a subtle desperation. "Are you sure you can't make it, honey? It's just, it would mean so much to your grandmother if you were here." I took a slow, steadying breath, consciously centering myself before I responded. "Mom, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm busy." "Busy with what?" "It's family." The unspoken accusation hung heavy and palpable in the air, a silent indictment. "You're choosing something else over us, over family." "I have commitments," I replied, my voice carefully modulated, deliberately neutral, betraying nothing of my internal state. "Things I need to do. Things that require my attention." There was a noticeable pause on her end of the line, a brief silence pregnant with unspoken thoughts. "Well, everyone's talking about how much fun they're having. The house is beautiful, though a bit rustic, I suppose. Joe said he had a little trouble with the plumbing in the upstairs bathroom, and the Wi-Fi is rather spotty. But the view, he said, is absolutely amazing." A small, almost imperceptible smile, a fleeting private acknowledgement of the unfolding reality, touched my lips. Rustic. Body. Trouble. They were experiencing the unforeseen, unvarnished joys of unexpected homeownership firsthand, without any of the pleasantries or preparations. "I'm glad you're all enjoying yourselves," I said, my tone meticulously polite, almost detached, a coolly delivered observation. "Your Aunt Carol was asking if you'd heard from them. She said she tried to call your phone earlier, but it just went straight to voicemail." My phone had been deliberately placed on silent, tucked away in the bottom drawer of my desk, intentionally ignored for days. "I've been keeping my phone off," I replied, a partial truth, a strategic omission. "Trying to disconnect a little, you know." The conversation eventually wound down, a series of polite platitudes and strained goodbyes, leaving a faint residue of unease. As soon as I hung up, however, a distinct sense of quiet satisfaction washed over me. They were out there, somewhere on the coast, inconvenienced, perhaps slightly annoyed by the very place they had so casually assumed was theirs for the taking. They were experiencing a mild, uncomfortable dose of reality, a small, unintended consequence of their collective neglect, their casual disregard. The true payoff, the undeniable culmination of my quiet strategy, arrived a week later, when the initial dust had settled and the family members had scattered back to their respective lives. Uncle Joe, ever the diligent organizer, sent out a group email. It was a meticulously crafted summary of the reunion, filled with cheerful anecdotes and an abundance of pictures featuring smiling faces, a curated narrative of familial bliss. He'd written about the wonderful time they'd all had, and then in a peculiar, almost defensive aside, he mentioned the minor hiccups they'd encountered with the rental. He'd even included a vague, almost sheepish apology for the unexpected maintenance issues that had arisen. A few cousins, those who had always possessed a slightly more observant nature, a keener eye for nuance, began to ask questions. How come they had never heard of this particular rental property before? Who had actually booked it? Uncle Joe's reply was predictably vague, something about a last-minute deal that had fallen into his lap. Then, my cousin Sarah, the very same one who had sent me the initial thoughtless text message, messaged me privately. "Hey, I feel like I missed something. Was that your place they rented? Everyone's acting so weird about it." I replied simply, my words carefully chosen. "Yes, that was my place. I decided not to attend the reunion this year." Her response was immediate, a torrent of words spilling forth. "Wait, what? But you own it? And they didn't even know? And you didn't go?" The ellipsis in her text mirrored the one in her original message to me. But this time it felt different, infused with genuine confusion, a dawning reluctant understanding of the subtle but significant dynamic that had been at play. Within days the whispers began to circulate, subtle as a shifting tide. Not loud accusations or public pronouncements, but a series of almost imperceptible changes. A few individuals who had previously been quite vocal in their exclusion of me began to reach out, tentatively, offering hesitant apologies or convoluted explanations. My Aunt Carol called again, her tone markedly softer this time, genuinely asking if I was okay, a stark contrast to her previous distant inquiries. Even Uncle Joe, in a rare display of what might have been awkwardness, sent a short, stilted email, vaguely referencing a misunderstanding and suggesting, with a forced cordiality, that we all move forward. The beach house remained mine, a silent testament to my quiet autonomy. The sand was still soft beneath my feet, the ocean still roared its ancient song, and the sunsets were as consistently spectacular as ever. I didn't need to utter a single word about their assumptions or my meticulously planned quiet decision. The consequence wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a public shaming. It manifested in the hesitant smiles that flickered across their faces, the slight averting of gazes when our paths crossed, the subtle, almost subconscious shift in the way they spoke to me. They had assumed my absence from their festivities signified insignificance, a lack of importance, and in doing so, they had profoundly underestimated my quiet autonomy. They had walked into my sanctuary, expecting a continuation of their accustomed hospitality, and instead found themselves confronted with a stark, unvarnished reflection of their own casual disregard, their own passive exclusion. It was a small, silent correction, a quiet yet potent reminder that some doors remain closed, not because they are physically locked, but because the person holding the key simply chose not to open them. The salt air still carried the scent of freedom, and the waves continued to erase footprints, both theirs and mine. My haven remained inviolate, a testament to boundaries respected, even if implicitly. The quiet satisfaction of the experience settled deep within me, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun, and everything to do with a sense of well-earned peace. The family, or at least the parts of it that mattered, had learned a subtle lesson. Sometimes the most powerful statement is made not with words, but with the quiet, unwavering act of holding on to what is yours. The laughter on the beach would continue, but it would be a different kind of laughter, tinged with a new awareness, a subtle deference. And my silence, my absence, had spoken volumes.